Hi everyone, today our goal is I can compare and order multi-digit decimals. Today we're going to be comparing these multi-digit decimals by placing them on a number line and looking at them place value by place value to understand the value of each number. For this first problem, just watch and listen as I solve the problem and share my thinking. Now here I have two numbers, 2 and 345 thousandths and 2 and 354 thousandths. Now I know that some of you can just look at those numbers and you know which one is greater than the other or less than the other. However, I still want us to be thinking about how to put this on a number line and how to create a functional number line that fits the numbers that we're using. So in this case, we create a number line. Now, we can zoom in or zoom out as far as we want on any number line that we create. So I'm going to look at my first two whole numbers, 2. So that means I'm going to fall somewhere between 2 and 3. Then I'm going to look at my next place value, and I see that it's 3/10. Okay, so which means we'll be between 3/10 and 4/10. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to zoom way in. Instead of just using whole numbers, I'm going to say 2 and 3/10. And on this side, 2 and 4/10, because this goes all the way down to our thousandths place. So next, we look at our hundredths place. And we see that we have a difference in value in our hundredths place. And so when comparing, you can right there, you can say that 2 and 345 thousandths is less than 2 and 354 thousandths. But I also want to be thinking about where does this go on the number line? So we've zoomed in all the way into our tenths place, and now in between 2 and 3/10 and 2 and 4/10, we should have 10 marks, and those represent our hundredths. So these 10 marks here represent our hundredths. So we know that we're at 2 and 345 thousandths, but we have a 4 in our hundredths place. So that would be 2 and 34 hundredths. And in our next number, we have 2 and 35 hundredths, so they land there and there. So finally, we look at our last digit here to figure out where these go on our number line. And since we know we're going to be in between, for our first number, 4 hundredths and 5 hundredths, because there's 5 thousandths there, 5 thousandths is right in between our 2 and 4 hundredths and our 2 and 5 hundredths. So when we zoom way in, 2 and 345 thousandths falls there on our number line, and 2 and 354 thousandths is going to be just before the halfway point between 5 hundredths and 6 hundredths. So that's 2 and 354 thousandths. Now remember, we've zoomed way in on this number line. Let's just look at it if we were to zoom out really quick. So let's say I've got a number line and we'll go between 2 and 3. And I want to put these two numbers on my number line between 2 and 3. Well, I'd have to find my 3/10 and my 4/10, 3/10 and 4/10. And then, once I do that, I would zoom way in between my 3 and 4/10. Okay? And find my 4 hundredths and my 5 hundredths and my 6 hundredths. So right here, 2 and 345 thousandths, right here, 2 and 354 thousandths is where they would go on this number line. Now let's zoom back out and see what that looks like when we zoom back out. I'll try and get this lined up with how I had it. So when we zoom back out in between 2 and 3, our whole numbers, we can see that these two numbers are very, very close on a number line. There's not a lot separating them, just a little bit less than 1/100th. For these next two sets of problems, I want you to do it along with me in your journal, or if you're feeling really comfortable with it, you can solve them on your own and come back and check your work. So here we have the numbers 3 and 4/10 compared to 3 and 35/100. Remember, when we're comparing numbers, we're going to be comparing them with greater than, less than, or equal to signs. Now, when looking at these two numbers, the biggest mistake that students make is they often see a 4 here in this place value and 35 here on that side of the decimal, and they say, well, of course 35 is greater than 4, so 3 and 35/100 is greater than 3 and 4/10. Well, that is not true. One way to think about it is if you think about the value of these numbers, when working with decimals, it doesn't change the value. Once you start working to the right of the decimal, it doesn't change the value if you put a 0 in that hundreds place. And if you think of it in terms of whole numbers on the left side of the decimal, if you put a 0 in front of that 3, we know that doesn't change the value. Since you're on the right side of the decimal point, that 0 after the 4 does not change the value either. So what that means is, if it helps you, go ahead and put a 0 in the hundreds place so you have the same number of digits in each number. If you're able and feel totally comfortable just going place value by place value, then do that. So place value by place value, we're looking at our 3 and our 3, and those are equal. Then we move to our 4 and our 3, and those are different. We know that 4 is greater than 3, so 4/10 is greater than 3/10. So 3 and 4/10 is greater than 3 and 35/100, and we don't need to move any farther on our place values. Now, really quick, I do want to get really efficient with creating number lines and putting these on a number line. So if you did this problem on your own and you didn't put it on a number line, please do so now with me. So I'm going to start with 3, and I'm only going to go up to 3 and 5/10 because I know that both of these numbers are less than 5/10. So I'll make my tick marks up to 5/10, so 3 and 1/10, 3 and 2/10, 3 and 3/10, 3 and 4/10. Get them as evenly spaced as possible. We know that our 3 and 4/10 is going to land right on our 4/10 mark, so that's 3 and 4/10. And 3 and 35/100 is going to land in between our 3 and 3/10 and 3 and 4/10, because it's 5/100 there, so it lands directly in the middle. So we can see that 3 and 4/10 is greater than 3 and 35/100. For this last problem, I want you to pause the video and order these numbers from least to greatest, smallest to largest. Then come back and check your work. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my whole numbers, 4, 4, 4, and 4, and my ones and 5. In my ones place, we can see that 5 is the largest number there, so clearly that's going to be our greatest number. So we can just stop there with that, and I'm just going to put that in that number 4 spot. I'll number these 2, 3, and 4, so we can rearrange them. Now I'm going to look at my next place value, my 10ths place, and I see I've got a 2, a 7, and a 4. And so that's going to allow me to finish my ordering because they're all different. So the largest of those 3 is my 7/10. So that would be 4 and 7/10. And then 4/10, I'm working backwards here. So that's 4 and 457 thousandths. And finally, 4 and 2300. So when you're comparing numbers, The most efficient way to do it is to move place value by place value, but make sure you are lining up your place values because as you can see, 4 and 7/10 does not have as many digits as 4 and 457 thousandths. So when you're lining it up, you don't line it up with the last place value or the last digit. You line it up place value by place value. This is a tenth, so you line it up in the tenths place.